Morning friends, happy Tuesday, how the heck you doing? And we knew it, didn't it? We knew that this globally significant news that the international media have literally flogged to death would be the next thing to land on the cover of Hello Digital and Hello Magazine. What happens next? Well, what's happened so far is that the royals, the non-working taxpayer-funded royals, have all gone to church together to make it look as though they're in some sort of unified point of view and unified organisation, when all the world wants to know about is what Harry and Meghan are going to do when they land here. What's vital, what's important in this headline? If you wanted to pick one thing out of the headline, and maybe two, the first thing would be, do they really think that Archie and Lilibet are going to be able to socialise and play with William and Catherine's children? We know Archie's read the book Spare, right? Do you think Archie wants to be around that family? I would say no. The second point, William is aghast. He's aghast that Harry and Meghan have the temerity, that's a brilliant word, isn't it? That Harry and Meghan have the temerity to move back to the UK, the country of Harry's birth, where he rightly belongs as the proper future king of the UK. William's aghast that these two superstars are moving back. The jealousy is insane, and the jealousy is off the scale. These two are headline news. The rest of the family, in hours, get 14 views and maybe 10 likes. Terrible. Well done, Mary and Hagan. Well done, Meghan and Harry. Look forward to you coming back to the UK with the appropriate safety in place. Let's see what you're going to come up with next.
At 5 p.m. yesterday, pretty much every major news outlet in the world ran the story that Harry and Meghan are moving back to the UK, at least for some extended period of time. Now, there are obviously still details about this that we do not know, and details that I don't want to know, especially where exactly the kids are going to school and where exactly the couple will be living. And Harry and Meghan, notably, have not stood up and announced themselves that this move is happening. But the reporting on this is remarkably consistent. This is not a Tom Sykes making a claim on his Substack, although he did say, I had this tidbit and I chose not to publish it. Sure, Tom. Whatever makes you feel better. Multiple reputable media outlets all the way up to the BBC are reporting this. So we are going to talk about why this is 99.99% confirmed at this point. I know some of you are still holdouts because Harry and Meghan haven't said it themselves in their own words. That's actually what I want to talk about today, because I think there's a really important lesson here about media literacy. Pay attention to the language used in the reporting from the two outlets that led this story. That basically means these are the outlets that had the report ready to go, published it, and then everyone else kind of trailed them and rewrote or sourced their own versions of this story once People and The Telegraph had hit publish. Harry and Meghan are moving back to Britain, People can exclusively reveal. That is not sources close to the couple say. In the next paragraph, we have the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are relocating with Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet for an extended period beginning this month. People understands. This claim is not being attributed to one specific unnamed source, or even several unnamed sources, palace sources, friends of the couple. This is very different from a report being branded as an exclusive, which admittedly the British tabloids love to do. Just because one person exclusively tells an outlet like the Daily Mail something doesn't necessarily make it an exclusive, especially not on this level. Similar thing happening here in The Telegraph, which was the other outlet to lead with this story yesterday evening. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are planning to move back to Britain. The Telegraph can reveal. What this language means is the reporters for The Telegraph and People, in this case Victoria Ward and Simon Perry, have sourced this story, have investigated it, have written it up, and are comfortable publishing it as a verifiable fact based on their work. And I know that that still isn't good enough for some people, and I do completely sympathize with that. I think protect your faves, absolutely. However, what most people seem to be referring to when they say, I don't believe anything unless it comes directly from Harry and Meghan, or I guess their representative, is this article from January 2022 in The Telegraph, in which they were briefed, ironically, from sources close to the couple, that sources would not be speaking on Harry and Meghan's behalf any longer. Basically, their team have promised unnamed sources will no longer speak for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Right away, do you see that there is a distinction here baked into this initial tidbit? There is a huge difference between an unnamed source and an anonymous source. Harry and Meghan's team are not on record. Their names are not attached to this. The journalist just isn't using their identity in the reporting. Maybe they were asked not to, maybe they felt they didn't need to because they can be identified as Harry and Meghan's team. Right here, the Sussexes communication team at Archwell. That suffices for this story. Other examples of sources that could be unnamed include friends, employees, or somebody involved tangentially in a project, someone who just knows what's happening with the Sussexes. So in those instances, when we have an anonymous, unnamed source, we should be asking these questions. Who is this person? What connection do they have to Harry and Meghan? Why is the reporter comfortable publishing their words? i.e., are they credible? How much access do they have? Is the journalist able to corroborate what they are saying? This is very different from what Harry and Meghan identified as unnamed sources speaking for us. And the 2022 Telegraph article actually makes this point, citing mystery sources claiming to speak for them in the press. This, crucially, is in the wake of Meghan's privacy case against the Mail on Sunday, which she won. At that time, the press was inundated with people selling their secrets, essentially, or just selling whatever they wanted to sell about Meghan. Here's an example from 2019, after the birth of Archie. Harry and Meghan are so proud, but probably quite relieved to have gotten the photos out of the way. They are rather tired. That is the type of thing coming from an unnamed source speaking for Harry and Meghan that they were making clear at this point would no longer happen. I do think we have walked that back even since 2022, but we'll set that to the side for now. Meredith Constant actually made a similar video to this, focusing more on why that was not really the case. She cites Omid Scobie, who even says, yeah, I thought this was weird, and kind of a byproduct of where the Sussexes were in 2022, setting up their own media enterprise. Down here, again, you can see another example of the kind of anonymous sourcing that Harry and Meghan no longer wanted interjecting on their behalf in the press. When Lilibet was born, a source told Us Weekly, Harry loves Lily and loves reading her bedtime stories and rocking her to sleep. Every day just gets happier. This article was never about Harry and Meghan saying that any unattributed, unnamed quote about their actions or their media moves would be fake. Reported information is still a thing. Journalists are still able to report on the Sussexes, gather information on them, even, yes, from unnamed sources with knowledge of the situation. You can absolutely say for yourself that this has not been officially confirmed by the Sussexes. I haven't seen it with my own eyes, therefore I'm going to choose not to believe it. That is, in its own way, a completely reasonable position. But it is not an example of the media lying or making things up. That is a much bigger claim. You need more evidence for that. And I think part of the confusion does stem from when this statement about unnamed sources was made. Think back to 2022, not late 2022, when Harry and Meghan announced their Netflix documentary. This was January 2022, when this was still on the horizon. Harry had not published Spare yet. This was before a lot of the direct-to-audience media strategy that Harry and Meghan have since sort of taken on. The basic idea that they were setting up at this time was, if you want to know how Harry and Meghan are feeling, hear it from Harry and Meghan. Because we have a documentary coming out, because we have a memoir coming out. And again, that is fine. That's actually a very smart marketing tactic. But it also doesn't eliminate that journalism exists. And Harry and Meghan do have a lot of control and a lot of say in their own media narrative at this point. Their representative is very snappy, very ready to jump in when something is inaccurate. Notably, they have not done that here. That's another reason I'm like, yeah, this is 99.99% for sure. But even this attitude of unnamed sources not speaking for us does not mean that Harry and Meghan get to decide that their own in-house communications team is the only authoritative way to get information about them. That, again, just ignores the role that journalism plays in this public sphere, particularly around the royal reporting sphere. Yes, 100%, those journalists reporting on them should be held to high standards, but the pendulum swing should not go so far in the other direction that we are just calling every reporter talking about Harry and Meghan a liar. Even in this case, there are several concrete, consistent details being reported across multiple outlets. Not only that Harry and Meghan are enrolling the kids in school and that King Charles was made aware of the plans on Sunday, but also look at this when we're talking about the security concerns involved in the Sussexes being in the UK. The People article by Simon Perry says a spokesperson for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex declined to comment on the matter of security. That would have been in context of this move back to Britain. The rep was contacted, and they took this opportunity not to rebut the story, merely saying that they were declining to comment on the security that would be at play here. So again, those are just the reasons that I and many other reputable commentators and reporters, I am a commentator, not a reporter, have felt comfortable talking about this story. You don't have to believe the story just because I believe it, but if your position is, I won't believe anything unless Harry and Meghan say it out of their own mouths, just know that is an entirely separate matter than advocating for media literacy and fair and balanced journalism. Fair and balanced does not mean Harry and Meghan get to decide what their press coverage is. I love them, but that is a little too close to the palace playbook for my liking, and I would assume yours as well.
Squaddies, I had to look at this headline twice because honestly, what are we doing here? Harry and Meghan haven't even landed in Britain, and somehow the media already wants to tell us what happens next. Rebuilding relationships, Archie and Lilibet's new life, William, Christmas. Whoa. Can these people at least get off the plane first? This is what makes the whole thing so ridiculous. Instead of simply reporting Harry and Meghan are returning to Britain, suddenly we're getting a full royal storyline with characters, future episodes, and apparently a Christmas special already in production. The suitcases haven't even hit the floor, and somebody at the newspaper is probably sitting there going, "Right, lads, what do we think Harry is doing at Christmas?" How would they know? They don't, and that's the point. So much of this coverage isn't about what Harry and Meghan have actually said or done. It's about taking a family decision and filling all the empty spaces with speculation. Harry and Meghan decide they want to spend more time in Britain. Suddenly it's, what does William think? Will Charles reunite with them? What about Christmas? How will the children adjust? What happens next? Mate, nobody knows. And regular people should be able to recognise the difference between news and somebody's imagination with a headline slapped on it. Because this is how the royal media machine keeps the story running. The actual event might be simple, but the speculation, that's endless. And every new theory creates another article, another television segment, another social media argument, and another pile of clicks. Harry and Meghan haven't even properly arrived, yet the media has already turned their return into a multi-part drama. Let the family arrive. Let them settle in. Let them live their lives. Then, if something actually happens, report it. But please, stop writing the Christmas finale before we've even watched episode 1. The UK media is running an absolute hustle, and everybody sees right through it. They spent years telling Harry and Meghan to leave, screaming for them to hand back titles and vanish. But the very second there's a whisper of a UK trip, the tabloids drop everything and plaster their faces across 90% of the front page, while shoving the rest of the royal family into a microscopic box in the corner. Why? Because deep down, the press knows William and Kate aren't bringing in the clicks, Charles isn't selling papers, and the Sussexes are the only real draw left in town. Harry and Meghan haven't even touched the runway yet the media is already manufacturing soap opera storylines about Christmas reunions and rebuilding ties, just to farm outrage and pay their bills. They don't hate the Sussexes, they're addicted to them, because without Harry and Meghan on the cover, nobody is buying what they're selling. Now this one really bothers me, squaddies, because right there on the list of these so-called key factors is Archie and Lilibet's new life. And I'm sorry, but can we give these children a break? They're kids, not royal chess pieces, not storyline generators, not material for endless speculation every time their parents make a family decision. Harry and Meghan are parents. They have every right to think about where their children live, where they go to school, who they spend time with, and what kind of environment they grow up in. That's parenting. Imagine an ordinary mum or dad choosing a school for their child and suddenly seeing a newspaper headline saying, "Shock school move, 4 things this means for the family." You'd be thinking, mate, I just filled out the school forms. But because these are Harry and Meghan's children, suddenly everything becomes royal strategy. Where will Archie go? What will Lilibet do? How will the children adjust? What does this mean for the monarchy? Calm down. Maybe it means their parents are trying to give them a good childhood. That's it. And here's the bigger point. Harry and Meghan have been very clear about wanting to protect their children from the level of media intrusion they experience themselves. So if they are making decisions about their children's future, perhaps the media shouldn't immediately treat those decisions as an invitation to investigate every detail. Archie and Lilibet didn't choose any of this. They didn't ask to be born into a famous family. They didn't ask for their parents to become subjects of endless headlines. And they certainly don't need strangers turning their childhood into another chapter of the royal family drama. So yes, discuss Harry and Meghan if you want. Discuss the adults. Debate their choices. But when it comes to Archie and Lilibet, let them breathe. Because sometimes the most royal thing a newspaper can do is actually show some restraint. They're children first. Royal connections come a very distant second.
Squaddies. Now let's get to another part of this coverage that had me shaking my head. Right there among the supposed key factors is William. Of course he is. Harry and Meghan are making plans for their family, and somehow the media can't resist dragging William straight into the middle of it. Harry returns to Britain. William. Harry spends time with his father. William. The children potentially start school. William. Christmas comes around. William. At this point, Harry could probably order a cup of tea and somebody would ask, but how does William feel about the biscuits? Come on. Why does every Sussex story need a royal rivalry attached to it? If Harry and Meghan are coming to Britain to spend time with family and build a life that works for their circumstances, why can't we discuss that without turning it into another episode of Harry versus William? Because here's the thing. The media creates the competition and then reports on the competition it created. First, they put the brothers side by side. Then they speculate about their feelings. Then they ask whether one is jealous, angry, threatened, or upset. And suddenly we're supposed to believe there's some massive royal showdown happening behind closed doors. But regular people know how families work. Sometimes siblings don't get along. Sometimes relationships are complicated. Sometimes people need distance. And sometimes people try to reconnect. That's life. It doesn't automatically need a scoreboard. Harry isn't returning to Britain to compete with his brother for the family trophy. He's a husband, he's a father, he's a son. And if he wants to spend time with his father or bring his children closer to family, that should be allowed to exist on its own. So I'm asking the British media, can Harry have one story that isn't secretly about William? Just one. Because Harry and Meghan haven't even arrived, and already somebody is trying to turn their family plans into round 98 of the Windsor Brothers Championship. Let Harry be Harry, let William be William, and stop turning every family decision into a royal boxing match. And this is where I think the whole thing gets completely overcooked. Look at the way this coverage is presented. Harry and Meghan are returning to Britain, and suddenly we've got Balmoral gatherings, royal meetings, bombshell language, and what happens next? You'd think Harry had announced he was arriving with a marching band and the keys to Buckingham Palace. Come on, let's bring this back down to earth. Harry and Meghan are a family. They're not invading Scotland. They're not marching into the palace demanding their old jobs back. They're not trying to take anybody's crown. They're simply making decisions about their own lives and their own family. And that's what I find so strange about the coverage. Why does their return automatically get framed as some kind of threat to the monarchy? Why can't the headline simply be, Harry and Meghan are returning to Britain? Done! That's the story. But apparently that's not dramatic enough. So we get explosive return. Then comes the royal summit. Then comes the speculation. Then comes William. Then Charles. Then Kate. Then Christmas. Before you know it, a family trip has become a full-blown royal blockbuster with 17 imaginary subplots. And let's be honest, squaddies, drama sells. Harry and Meghan quietly spending time with family isn't going to make nearly as many people click as royal family in crisis, what happens next? That's the trick. Take something relatively simple, add a little tension, throw in some royal photographs, put bombshell somewhere in giant letters, and boom, you've got another day's worth of content. But regular people can see through some of this. Because if Harry and Meghan are simply trying to spend time in Britain, reconnect with family and make choices for their children, why are we treating it like the monarchy has received an emergency alert? Their return doesn't have to threaten William. It doesn't have to threaten Charles. It doesn't have to threaten the institution.
Harry and Meghan can exist without competing with anybody. And that's the part I want people to remember. The media can make their return sound like the biggest royal crisis of the century, but at the end of the day, it's still a family making decisions about where they want to spend time and how they want to live. So maybe, just maybe, let them arrive first. Let them see their family. Let them settle in. And then if something actually happens, we can talk about it. Because right now, Fleet Street is already writing the sequel, the Christmas special and the spin-off series, and Harry and Meghan haven't even walked through the door yet. Thank you all for watching. I am your host, Miles. And Squaddies, you already know. Keep the love coming, keep speaking your truth, and don't let the royal drama fool you. Until next time, catch you in the next episode. God bless you, love you all, and have a blessed week ahead.